Have you ever had one of those days where everything just feels off to you? Like you're scattered, you're reactive, you're disconnected. And then you realize, I'm kind of off my routine. I'm off of what I've set for myself. So in today's episode, we're going to dive into why daily rituals and those are some of the secret weapons for stability, like that self-care and that recovery. So whether you're in the deep work of healing or whether you're building new habits, very in the beginning, we're going to talk about the intention behind that. And then we're just give you some possible things that you can feel free to steal shamelessly. That's what we're going to talk about today.
Welcome to Beyond the Facade podcast. I'm your host, Luke Gordon, and I'm thrilled to have you join me in this space today. What we're going to be doing is diving deep into the trials and triumphs and truths of seeking authenticity. Becoming your true self isn't about a single action or moment. It's a relentless pursuit, a commitment to self that reveals the rich connection and meaning that our life has to offer. So whether this is your first time tuning in or you're a regular listener, know this: what you're building here goes beyond a conversation. You're here to challenge, to change, and to celebrate the incredible journey of becoming your authentic self. Because when you dare to show up fully, the rewards are immeasurable. So welcome to Beyond the Facade. Let's get started.
All right. So before we get into some practical solutions, just want to say thank you to Darren. He's showed up today. He took my invitation to join me for this. And this is the reason why I wanted Darren to be a part of this conversation. He's a peer mentor with Choose Recovery Services, and he's worked his own journey, and so much respect for how he's gone about that. Just like me, both very imperfect, but also fighting really hard to make sure that we stay as healthy as we possibly can. And one of the many things that I've loved watching Darren talk to other men about as he's done some mentoring and supporting other men is he talks about coming back to what does recovery actually look like. So we're going to talk about some of the practical sides of recovery when it comes to daily rituals. And rituals is kind of an interesting word because when you take a step back and you look at something, you go, oh, I have rituals in my life, whether I notice them or not. There are processes that I've set up for myself where I just go through life. And those rituals for somebody like me with compulsive behavior is something that I don't recognize that exists to get me to a place I don't want to be. But anyway, Darren, it's good to have you back. Do you have anything you want to say for yourself? For those of you who don't know you?
Hey, I'm glad to be here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
Yeah, totally. So let's talk a little bit about this part of this word that I didn't hear until probably like 6-7 months ago. And it was another guy and Darren that introduced me to the word. It was called monastic discipline. So monastic discipline. And how does it have anything to do with recovery? Let's talk about the fact that for centuries, you've had monks across different traditions, whether it's Christian or Buddhism or other spiritual paths that have lived in like a structured rhythm and daily practices. So they wake up at the same time, they engage in meditation or prayer, they do a lot of meaningful work, they practice self-reflection, and they live very intentionally in their community. So we're not getting into some religious devotion today, but it's about creating a life aligned with our values that's more consistent and they definitely have daily discipline. When it comes to rituals today, like the comparison of rituals that exist with like sex addiction, compulsive behavior versus like healthy rituals. Because we're talking a lot about rituals today, but we have one set of rituals, the one that already exists that are around sexual compulsive behavior or this healthy ritual, which we're talking about today. So like to define rituals, like it's when it comes to sex addiction, it's like repetitive, predictable behaviors like escalate towards like this acting outside sexually. We're going to talk about healthy rituals like that intentional, structured behavior that provides emotional stability. So it's proactive versus reactive. And one of the things to know about rituals is for men that are in recovery, it's extremely intentional. They understand the purpose for it. They understand like there are things that I have to do to fill that space and that void that my compulsive behavior leaves. And I'm very intentional with what I set up. If you think about the triggers that exist, which cause compulsive behavior, stress, loneliness, boredom, anger, those types of things, often the rituals that we have are going to proactively help us fill in some of those spaces. So we have some examples we're going to go through today. Darren, when you think about self-care having to do with recovery, what comes to your mind from your journey or watching other men?
Mm. It's interesting how the definition of self-care has evolved over time within myself. Um, Pre-recovery, self-care was eating a pro bar and going for a run. Right? That was the extent of self-care. Am I basically meeting the very basic needs 30-40% of the time? And that's what I've seen is within myself is it's taken on much more of a holistic view of what is the quality of not only my physical body, but my spiritual body and my life in general. And what are all those things that I can do? What are the inputs and the variables that I can tweak that are going to overall improve everything across the whole spectrum of things going on in my life, right? I think if you kind of abstract this a bit, right? We are humans, and if you abstract that even more, humans are animals, right? We're social animals. We have the ability to cultivate consciousness and use that in interesting ways, but we're still animals. Animals and living, breathing organisms, there is a periodicity, there is a pattern to their life. There are seasons and cycles. And in my experience, I've witnessed and caused a lot of disruption and dysfunction in my life when I consciously or unconsciously do things to either deny or maybe inhibit the progression or the natural flow of those cycles. So let me give you an example. Throughout the day, the hormones and the chemicals in your body change, whether it's cortisol or serotonin or dopamine or oxytocin or all of these things. They're going up and down based on the inputs around us, right? What we're eating, movement, sunlight, all of those sorts of things. And so there is a periodicity to these hormones and these chemicals in our brain. And that creates responses in our body, right? And I can flow with it and I can feed that. And the effect of that is my body thrives. The cycles of my body, sleeping and waking and metabolism, are all functioning normally. Or I can do things that kind of monkey wrench that a bit. And then that things start to break down over time, whether I'm starting to have physiological symptoms of that dysfunction or cognitive or behavioral or relational dysfunctions. Those creep in when I'm introducing things that are disrupting the natural flow. Okay. There's also another component to that where as organisms that are not only alive and functioning, you know, somewhat autonomously in the systems that we live in, but we also have this consciousness, right? And the consciousness, however you define it, is a need in its sort of root sense, is a need and a connection to have a connection to something beyond us, outside of us, to take our own daily existence and to connect that with the existence of something larger outside of ourselves. And it's been really interesting to work with other men and to work within myself in this recovery journey to understand what that actually means, right? Where am I hamstringing my own ability to evolve and progress and grow? And where am I nourishing that? And I'd say there's some pretty common patterns.
Yeah,
That
I love that you say all animals begin with, and how did you phrase that? We have patterns and we have processes that we use, whether we know them or what did you say there?
the periodicity.
Huh? Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. When it comes to daily rituals, one of the things I think about is this book called Atomic Habits, and James Clear wrote it. He said in this book, he says, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fell to the level of your systems. So I think about me trying to get sober or whatever it might be. I get so frustrated with myself that like, do I just lack like a bunch of willpower? I must just be, but I was so confused by it because I'm like, mm, still successful in my career. There's other things I've been able to accomplish. So why can't I get sober? And I think about this from the perspective of what James Clear said in that book is my goal was to get sober. And it's not that something's wrong with me. It's that I fell to the level of my systems, which what supports my sobriety. And I think about that from a daily ritual standpoint. I put a lot of things in my life that would just fuel dopamine, and I was oversaturated with dopamine. But really, it was about what I would need intentionally, a repeated action that created that structure that would support my overall well-being. So I didn't fall back in that addictive type tendency. And one of the things I've noticed, Darren, if you could speak to this in your own experience, but it's not about that perfection piece. It's consistency, like over that like intensity piece. Like it's that long lasting change. Do you have any thoughts on like that? Not the perfection piece, but the more of the consistency piece when it comes to that support of well-being?
Oh yeah, totally. The best analogy, I mean, the running for me is analogous and connected to so many parts of my life and takes on great meaning. Think of if you were training for a marathon or an ultra marathon, right?
Mhm.
I'm naturally drawn to the longer stuff. And when you're training for something like that, let's say you want to run Boston and you haven't run in years. You're not going to walk out of the door and suddenly do 26.2.
Mm-mm.
Maybe you do a couple of laps of your neighborhood just walking. So your joints and your muscles are like, hey, we're waking up again. Maybe you have to do that for a bit. But there is a pattern and a plan in how you approach that goal. And so, you go through your week and you start breaking down mileage charts and pacing charts, depending on what your goal time happens to look like. And you start cranking through the miles and the hours on your feet. Now, a good plan also has flexibility built into it because we have families and jobs and things come up and sometimes we get sick. And so it's not that perfection in terms of following that plan, but it's the consistency over time that conditions your body, conditions your muscles and your joints and your brain and your heart, your brain, I think more than anything.
How do you measure consistency compared to perfectionism? Like how consistent do I need to be, but not focusing on perfectionism? Do you have any, do you have any thoughts on that?
Perfection is you don't miss,
Huh.
right? You don't ever miss a day. You don't ever fall short of your goals and there's no losses.
Mm.
But I think that's misleading because the body doesn't care and doesn't really notice if you're perfect versus if you're consistent, right? It's consistent, sustained effort over time that introduces the change into your body and into your mind, really.
Yeah.
And so just a lot of that is just getting into the pattern of it. And patterns don't have to be perfect, but they need to be consistent enough for there to be a recognized cadence to it, meaning whatever that looks like. If I'm running Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and a long one on Saturday or Sunday, that's enough. The body will respond, my mind will respond in similar ways than if I'm doing it 7 days a week. And in fact, 7 days a week may actually not be the right thing for me, right? Because you're not creating that space to where you can actually your body can contextualize those changes that are happening inside and recover in a sense and rebuild.
I like that. I like that a lot. We're going to take a quick break for a moment. I want to let you know of some things that we have coming up at Choose Recovery Services. I'm very excited to tell you about the Unmasked Intensive we have coming up in May. It's May 13th through the 16th in Spanish Fork, Utah. The name of the intensive is Unmasked Paths to Authentic Masculinity. Let me tell you some of the things we're going to accomplish. We're going to explore some root causes, like at the end of the day, what's underneath this behavior? what's the why behind it? What's the insights into understanding why my behavior existed, the one that kept me in secrecy and hiding? We're going to embrace vulnerability. So we're going to confront a lot of the struggles of that non-judgmental space so you can foster more authentic connections with the people that you love. We're going to realign with your values. We're going to learn new coping strategies, and we're going to forge some authentic connection. We're going to build a lot of camaraderie to hear that happens. I wanted to share with you what previous participants have said about this transformation. So here's what one guy said. I'm just going to read it to you. I loved the connection with those around me. It was eye-opening to learn how to open up and show love for myself and be okay with what's going on inside of me, no matter how hard or ugly I may see it. I specifically remember this man saying this and just being astounded by like, wow, if I'm around people that really open up, what can I explore and learn about myself? And this intensive, he found it to be really eye-opening. So anyway, for more information and reserve your spot, go ahead and visit our website and we'll provide some information for you. And then take the time to invest in yourself so you can start to lean in a more authentic way in your life. Looking forward to seeing you there. Let's get back to our episode.
The other thing with perfection is it's a farce. Like, it doesn't exist. And yet we want it, but it's not there. And so rather than punching yourself in the face because something that is unattainable, let's just accept it. Like, there is no perfection. There never will be in this existence. And the reality is that consistency is the best that we can do, right?
What if I don't know how to measure the difference between perfectionism and consistency? Because let's say my brain is like really wired towards, okay, but what's enough? Like, okay, I get it, Darren. I don't have to be perfect, but what's consistent then? If I'm really tied to that, like, that number or something, that's something I picture people listening to this podcast and going, okay, if I need daily rituals, if I need my morning routine, if I need my recovery check-ins, if I need my self-care rituals, okay, is it 75% of the time, 80% of the time? Like, what is consistent? What would you say to that person just like wanting to overanalyze it?
So I would say slow down and breathe.
Okay.
Um,
Wait, me on the podcast right now or that person? Just
that
kidding.
person. Yeah. No, you're doing great, man. I mean, you got a good pace. Whether you're training for a marathon or you're in your own recovery journey, we're talking about changing patterns that have been established for years or decades. In my case, decades of life, many, many decades. And things don't change that are that deep that quickly, right? And so there's sort of dramatic steps that we can take, and then there's also gentle and real steps that we can take. Perfectionism is a particularly pernicious way of being, and there's so much self-hatred and criticism underneath that. So the reason I say slow down and breathe is because the messaging of perfectionism is you're not doing it right. You're not enough.
Okay.
You won't be enough until you do it perfectly, right?
Yeah.
When you slow down and you breathe, you're okay in that moment, even though you're not perfect. If you
So
can
you're
find your
actually
breath.
You're actually saying, hold on, if you're really focused on perfectionism, like that number, slow down and notice what you're experiencing. You're actually wanting that person to do that and to notice why you're, to go a little deeper into why you're having that person breathe.
Well, okay, so let's say you have perfectionism and it is just white hot pissed inside of you, right?
Mhm.
That's not your thing,
Mhm.
but let's just walk with it.
Okay. You say it's not my thing because I don't know. I don't feel like I'm that far off.
No, that's not your jam.
Okay.
At least I don't see it. So let's say that's your thing, right? If I say to you, Luke, it doesn't exist, just stop. Just stop. I can hear Carolyn Mace's voice in the back of my head saying, just stop. Just stop. Don't do it. Just stop. But it's not that simple. That willpower is always going to fail you, right? Because there's stories behind that. There's beliefs about yourself. There's beliefs about others. And those are the things that are fueling that perfectionism. So if I just say, don't be perfectionist, you will fail, right? Because you're not there is a cognitive dysfunction. There is a, whatever it is, it's like, if you've got an infected wound and you just put a Band-Aid on it, but you don't disinfect it, it's going to get ugly. And so the reason I say slow down and breathe is because there has to be a space for you to be in the presence of those stories and those emotions and those sensations in your body to create a pause where you can start to question them and get curious with it without judgment, but to understand, okay, when I'm feeling this sense of I have to do this perfectly, then I can hear these childhood stories come up. And when I can start to narrate those stories and write them down and understand those are the drivers behind this sense of perfectionism, then I can start to attend to those with a lot of self-compassion and sit next to and with and hold those parts of me that are hurting so badly that they're running towards this mirage of perfectionism as a savior in my life, right? But when really what I need and what we all need is to have this safe place within ourselves first, where we can come to those stories and come to those emotions and those wounds and those challenges and just be with them. They want to be heard. They want to be held. They want to be understood. And then when we start to cultivate that relationship with those places, perfectionism and the need for that starts to fade away. And consistency is enough because consistency produces results, but a lot more gently.
So let's talk about some examples of what daily rituals look like. If I'm not perfect, get it. It's about consistency over intensity. Let's talk about what some of these things are. Here's how Choose Recovery Services goes about a guy that's newer into his journey or some of the compulsive behavior says, all right, there are 3 pieces that pornography or sexually compulsive behavior leave in your life that you got to fill with something new. So dopamine, which is that like reward, triggers that reward part of our brain that, oh, that feels good. Oh, I like that. Also known like purpose. So you take something that existed that was dopamine filled, now you put something healthy in its place. So Darren, what type of activities have you seen people put in their space that gives dopamine, but it's a healthy level of dopamine compared to oversaturation of dopamine? What have you noticed there?
Exercise is a good one. And
Really good.
exercise can be anything that resonates with you, right? Whether it's playing soccer or going on a walk or yoga or going for a run, anything where you're moving your body, you're engaging your muscles, you're feeling the resistance, you're increasing your heart rate, releases dopamine. But let's be clear, there's lots and lots of ways that you can get dopamine. Overeating, you get a huge dopamine hit, right? And so mindfulness in how you're getting it is really important because,
Really important.
yeah, maybe I'm removing the dopamine hits from sexually compulsive behavior, but there's a lot of other ways where I could get it that may not be healthy.
Cross addiction, which is just like unhealthy eating, those things that are leave you depleted rather than build back up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One that I struggled with when once I had established sobriety around the sexuality piece was then replacing that with other, legal, ethical, but still addictive behaviors like an excessive consumption of caffeine. Right? I'm getting a hit from that. It feels good, but the impact of that is I'm being numb, right? And in that numbness, that's fertilizing those old fields of dissociating from my life without intentionality, where it's really easy to coast. And that's tiger territory. That's dangerous.
Oh, so dangerous. One of the most dangerous ones. And I knew this therapist that I really, really respected, and she worked with men, and she made it a requirement like, hey, I'm not going to work with you unless you build in getting your heart rate up for 20 to 30 minutes once a day, 7 days a week. She's like, I won't. She's like, I don't see men get sober, recover unless they get their heart rate up for 20 to 30 minutes a day. And I didn't really know the why behind that, but that's that piece of, that's going to be a level of dopamine that is, instead of numbing you out, really wakes you back up. And there was a lot of purpose behind it. There was a lot of satisfaction. Okay, let's go to oxytocin is the other thing that Choose Recovery Services use to help build daily rituals in. What have you noticed from oxytocin, Darren, that men build into their lives, their daily routine?
In a recovery context, oxytocin, well, even outside of recovery, oxytocin is that connection, that bonding, the relational, one of several, but I would say the big relational one, where we feel like positive impact in our sense of being from having connection with other people.
You're big on this. You're big on this.
A big shift for me and for other men, especially men who, like myself, struggled for years with pornography, was replacing online connection or perceived connection. Because let's face it, engaging with porn online, that's an oxytocin hit. You're connecting with these unknowing, exploited individuals that you are
Mhm.
engaging with. Replacing that online connection with people in real physical world, right? And those are going to be the people that are around you, which is probably your family, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a reprioritization in where you spend your time and how you spend your time with other people and who those people are. And suddenly the quality of the interactions with other people starts to take on new meaning because your body really recognizes the need and the importance of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because you're always saying in groups, it's not funny. I just love that word. You're always talking about, guys, it's the stuff that happens between the meetings. It's the connection one on one. It's those conversations. That's the oxytocin. It's that bonding
Mhm.
chemical. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can bond with this computer screen. You can feel like you matter, you're seen or validated. And that actually isn't a really real life experience. O- Okay. So the third one, when it comes to dailies, that we've introduced here at Choose is serotonin, which is that ability to access rituals or build in rituals that produce some type of peace, calm, connected to self experience. So, what have you noticed there can be helpful for guys?
Mindfulness practices and sleep are probably the two biggest ones. Serotonin's involved in that natural sleep wake cycles. If I'm not getting enough, then I obviously feel like crap inside, and that messes up the rest of the kind of suite of hormones and things going on in my body. But the things that the men and myself seem to respond the most favorably towards is having some kind of mindfulness practice. It can look like a lot of things. For some, it's prayer. For others, it's meditation. For others, it's just sitting and breathing. I have a very close friend who I would say the lion's share of his serotonin producing activities that he does daily, like this is part of his daily non-negotiables, is sitting in reflection and journaling. Anything that slows that pace down, that allows you to feel and have awareness to the things that are
Mhm.
going on inside of you anyways and going on outside of you. But first here, what's the texture of my breath? How does my heartbeat feel? Can I sense tension in my body? Right? Cultivating that awareness without judgment, just being curious with it, that allows us to then start to approach, again, without judgment, those things that are going on inside of us anyways, where we can start to address them, we can start to heal them, we can start to work with them, and we can start to shift things more in a direction where we're living with intentionality.
Thank you for sharing that. So much gold in there. I always wonder when people hear this, they're going to be like, yeah, I know. Or I don't know. That sounds like does it really make a difference if I introduce these three things into my life or these three concepts? And let's just talk about for a second the why these daily rituals matter. Why, if I intentionally bring in dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin in different types of ways, why they make a difference. So I have 7 of them here for you. Okay. And I'm just going to highlight them quick because I figure if we give you the why, it can be like, all right, if I'm not currently doing that, maybe I can give this a little bit of space. All right. So here are the ones, and Darren, feel free to jump in on any of these or after I say them, come back to any you feel are really important that we should spend more time on. First why is they're going to provide a lot of stability and structure. So what we didn't get when we were younger probably was a lot of who I can count on. So I had a lot of maladaptive coping mechanisms to help me survive through life. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to intentionally provide that stability and structure for myself. That's the first why. The second one is it reinforces those small investments that create consistency on who I'm going to become. It's who I am, but who I become, it's how I become aware of who I am. So that's that reinforcing of self. The third reason is they help regulate our emotions and reduce those triggers. It's the difference between a day where I can actually win against my values, even though it feels like a struggle, to where, yeah, I just a loss of control. The fourth piece, the why is you were talking about earlier, it builds that like self-awareness, my ability to be able to stop and notice what's going on around me, that mindfulness, which in turn, which is the next one, it's going to build like why it strengthens my identity and my purpose. Like, who am I? Let me become aware of the part where I hate myself and I loathe myself because of my behavior. Now I'm like more aware of who I am. And there's an increased amount of value from self. And then these daily rituals increase that resilience, that long-term growth. Sometimes it's like, okay, how long do I need to do this daily dose for? How long? Like, is it like you get it 90 days, right? And then I break a habit, I'm free of porn, and I just go on without life. No, it's just built in. And like all of a sudden there's a desire for it. And there's like the anchor now that I didn't have before. And now I have a taste for it that I've acquired. And it goes on forever. So anyway, there's some whys for you. Anything there, Darren, you want to spend more time on?
Looking at the daily dose or your daily pattern, your daily non-negotiables, whatever you want to call it, to me, it kind of boils down to this idea that you can't pour from an empty cup, right? I can't expect to be able to show up for other people if I don't first show up for myself and meet my own needs, right? We're talking very basic needs around, am I getting the right fuel? Am I getting the right sleep? Am I getting the right calm and peace and meaning in my life? And doing so, as you said, with intentionality regularly. Because what I'm doing then is I'm essentially insulating myself and I'm strengthening myself. So when I walk into my day, whatever I'm doing, whether I'm in a career worker role or I'm with my family or with my partner, stuff comes up and I'm creating a grounded strength that gives me a much better ability to then show up in the moment with strength and really with my heart. It's interesting. If you look at, I don't know that this is true. I'm gonna have to look after this, but this thought came to mind. Looking back, and this is maybe a silly example, but if you look back over the compulsive behavior and the sensations or lack of sensations that were going on in your body at the time that you were sort of leading up to that and engaging in whatever that behavior was, it almost feels like there was a fog, right? There's a numbness for sure, but oftentimes it's like you're just wandering and on autopilot and you're not really aware of what's going on around you. I think a lot of people can relate to that. And I wonder, I know that low serotonin levels, for example, can create a sense of a lack of mental clarity and a fog in the brain. And so if I'm deep in addiction and I am sleeping like garbage and I'm eating like crap and my serotonin is going to be way down and that is going to create a fog and I'm living in that fog, right? And so if I'm trying to walk or run out of that foggy field, then I'm going to want to do everything that I can to disperse that fog. And so that's where the serotonin comes in. Eating those tryptophan-rich foods is going to boost that. All of my chicken and eggs and the complex carbs and the meditation and the stress-reducing things and the exercises are all going to boost my serotonin, which gives me greater clarity, which means my decision-making center and my frontal cortex is going to be online, which means I'm acting and being with intentionality, right? And so you got to say, okay, what's the end goal? And then walk back through, kind of like there's a chain of provenance to the beginning and say, okay, this is where I want to be, and this is where I am today. What are the steps that I need to do to get there? And I'm going to first start by fueling all of those systems that need to be fully online and functioning in a healthy, productive way so I can get there.
I'm so glad you tied that in. Right there. Okay, so we're going to start to wrap out here. And so here's your call to action. All right. So if you're sitting here going like rituals, dailies, we call them the daily dose, getting dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin very proactively, very intentionally. So your daily rituals, they don't need to be like, you don't need to be perfect with them. Focus a lot less on the perfectionism piece, but really the small actions. And what's one that you need to add? So take a look at this, see what hits home for you. If you find yourself struggling, going, I don't know if mine's the right stuff, reach out. Let's talk about it in a group setting or one-on-one. We want to support you in that. So track the progress, but not for perfection purposes. And please be accountable. Share what you've committed to with someone that supports you in your growth. Don't do that alone. But anyway, looking forward to continuing the conversation. Darren, thanks for hanging out today. I really appreciate it. Any closing thoughts before we wrap out here?
Yeah, appreciate you, man.
Yeah, appreciate you too.
Hi, my name is Hallie Roderick with Choose Recovery Services. And if you're a woman healing from betrayal trauma and you find yourself feeling stuck or experiencing overwhelming triggers, having a difficult time trusting yourself or even thinking about trusting others, or having a hard time understanding what healthy boundaries are, how to hold those, I want to invite you to consider joining us at our upcoming Courage to Thrive Intensive, held on April 23rd through 26th in Spanish Fork, Utah. These intensives are one of my favorite things to be a part of because healing happens in community. There's just something different that happens when you're in person with other women who maybe your stories aren't exactly the same, but there's a mutual understanding and a safety that is created by being in a common community. So if this sounds like something that would be beneficial to you, please check the show notes, reach out to our office to get more information, and come see us in Utah on April 23rd through 26th. We'd love to have you join us.
One of the things I love and I'm so passionate about is helping women get in their bodies because betrayal trauma disconnects us from our bodies. So just why it's easy to minimize and rationalize and justify a lot of these behaviors that are harming us. Your body holds on to so much of the trauma that you've experienced, even if you've tried so hard in your mind to let go of it. Because trauma isn't just a memory, it is stored deep within you. And that true healing means going beyond just talking about it, which is why I am so excited about the up and coming Body Awakened Brain Spotting Intensive. There are a few spots left. I would love to have you join me. It's small, it's intimate, where you will experience deep body-centered healing through brain spotting, powerful somatic exercises, and connection in a supportive community that sees you, that holds space for you, and that can help you reclaim what was taken. This isn't just about healing, it's about transformation. It's about reconnecting to your body and releasing what no longer serves you and stepping more into that empowered, whole version of you. This is what I love helping my clients attain, and doing it in a very intensified way can be really powerful. April 10th through 12th, click the show notes for Brain Spotting Intensive, but it's not just about brain spotting. We're doing so many experiences with the body to connect back to the body. I cannot wait. Come join me. Let's awaken your body and release the trauma and start reclaiming safety and reclaiming you.
Hey, thanks for joining us today. If this is something that you connected with, I'd love to meet with you more and talk about it. So what you can do is go to chooserecoveryservices.com or check the show notes. And there what we can do is set up a quick conversation to meet. Thanks so much for listening to Beyond the Facade, where we unmask the authentic self.